Welcome back to WD.
FM, the official Walt Disney Family Museum podcast. We're your hosts, Brie Bertoluccini, Marketing Manager.
And Chris Mullen, Senior Marketing and Communications Coordinator for the Walt Disney Family Museum.
Great to be back with you, Chris. I thought it would be kind of fun to start this episode off celebrating Walt Disney's Peter Pan 75th anniversary. So on February 5th, 1953, with the help of a little faith, trust, and pixie dust, audiences flew to Neverland. Now, I always remember watching this film as a kid, and my favorite scenes were always like the shaving moments between Mr. Smee and Captain Hook. It kind of has like a ASMR feel for it, and there's something just like really satisfying about that. But a couple of years back, like I revisited the film, and I have to say that I don't think Peter Pan is the hero of this story. This is a controversial take. Like as an adult, I feel so bad for Captain Hook. I mean, if anyone cut my hand off and fed it to the crocodile, I would want some revenge as well. So I don't know, justice for Captain Hook.
Justice for Captain Hook. Justice for poor Nana is more like it. Now, surprisingly, I didn't grow up with this movie. So my connection to the film is more to do with Peter Pan's many appearances at Disneyland and my time here at the Walt Disney Family Museum. I was quite the intrepid autograph hunter when I was a child at Disneyland, and few characters could relate to a small child like the boy who wouldn't grow up. Peter Pan's flight is my dad's all-time favorite attraction, so if we caught the line at a good time, which was rare.
I know, it's always 40 minutes.
Always. I always thought that the sign was just stuck on 40 minutes, regardless of how long it actually was. But, about the ride, the scene as you leave the nursery in Flyover London is just as enchanting and timeless as it is in the film. And as a nearly lifelong fan of Fantasmic, the nighttime spectacular, the boom from the cannon from the Columbia signaling the beginning of the Peter Pan unit always scared me as a kid, in a good way, no matter how much I saw it coming. And then beyond Disneyland, my museum connection, when I started working at the museum in 2014, I had the unique opportunity to spend entire days in a gallery highlighting one of the most iconic artists in Disney history and one who had an indelible impact on the look and feel of Peter Pan, Mary Blair. So definitively, I'd say my favorite part of Peter Pan is the incredible concept artwork and color styling by Mary Blair. Now, another thing about the film and its connection to the museum, if you go to Peter Pan on Disney Plus and you go to the extras section, you can find an introduction to the film by our co-founder and Walt's daughter, Diane Disney Miller, that was filmed right in our own galleries.
That is a hot tip. I actually, always forget that there's the extras that are still part of Disney Plus. That used to be part of the DVD, and you can still find them. We have quite a few of them that feature the Walt Disney Family Museum on those DVD extras that are now available on Disney Plus. I think we have one for The Jungle Book, Lady and the Tramp.
Weren't you involved in the Lady and the Tramp one?
Yes. I make a small cameo.
It's your big screen debut.
Yes. So that one's really fun. For this DVD extra, they brought in a Cocker Spaniel that looks like Lady, and she was trained so well, and she took her own little tour finding all of the doggy moments throughout the galleries, and it is such a precious little extra. It is so cute. So definitely check that one out as well.
We'll have to bring that back up when we cover Lady and the Tramp.
Yeah.
We'll do a deep dive into just that little DVD extra. And on that note, let's jump into our program roundup. During Black History Month, we celebrate the achievements and culture of members of the African diaspora. For the month of February, we're screening Marvel Studios' Black Panther, directed and co-written by Bay Area native Ryan Coogler. This film is intended for ages 13 and up. Some language and depictions of weapons and violence may not be suitable for younger viewers. Screenings occur most Saturdays and Sundays, February 4th through the 26th at 2 p.m. in our theater. Visit our calendar for more information, more up-to-date screening times, and to reserve your tickets.
I am very excited for Black Panther to be screening in our theater. I think it's our first Marvel film we've ever been able to screen, if I have that right.
Yes, it is. So in our theater, it's just such a great experience to see a movie of any kind, much less, I feel like I'm so used to watching Marvel movies at home now that I kind of forget what it's like seeing it on the big screen.
Yeah, definitely. So highly recommend. On Sunday, February 5th, author Clothilde Ewing virtually shares her book, Stella Keeps the Sun Up, the whimsical tale of a little girl who is determined to do away with bedtime forever. This virtual story time is hosted on Zoom and free. Registration is required. Visit our calendar for more information.
Join us in person on Thursday, February 23rd for the very special program, Getting Loud and Proud with the Proud Family Louder and Prouder creative team. The Proud Family creator and executive producer, Bruce W. Smith, and executive producer, Ralph Farquhar, will lead an in-depth conversation about how they revived their beloved Disney Channel animated series for a new generation on Disney+. They will discuss the importance of authentic storytelling in the Proud Family, Louder and Prouder, and how it reflects current events and trends, while also highlighting the original show's themes of celebrating family, friendship, inclusion, and cultural differences. Both seasons of the Proud Family, Louder and Prouder are available to stream exclusively on Disney+.
Very excited about that. That is an in-person program, and I think it'll be just so much fun. As many of you may have been alerted, Walt Disney's The Jungle Book, Making a Masterpiece, closed January 5th unexpectedly due to building repairs that were necessitated by the recent storms in San Francisco. So all the building repairs were made, and the exhibition will reopen February 2nd and remain open through Sunday, March 5th, 2023. The exhibition was in its last week when it closed, so I'm glad that it will be open a little while longer for guests to experience this wonderful exhibition.
I'm glad the exhibition will be with us a little longer too. We also have some really great exhibition merchandise available in our museum store, in person and online. We have t-shirts, a sweatshirt, and other collectibles. I love the sweatshirt, personally. It's so comfy. What would you say is your favorite piece of merchandise from the Jungle Book exhibition, Bree?
If I had to highlight one thing, I would say I really love the Mowgli and Baloo pin. We have quite a few of our exclusive Disney pins available for purchase in our online store, and I think maybe even more in person. But I really, really do love how it's two pins, Mowgli sitting on top of Baloo, and then it has our title treatment as a separate pin, so you can kind of wear them in tandem or however you like. So I think that's really fun. I also suggest picking up the exhibition catalog. So if you weren't able to come and visit this exhibition in person, the catalog is the next best thing. So the story is expanded from what is featured in the exhibition, and the printing, all the beautiful concept art is just wonderful to look at. You can visit our website, waltdisney.org/store, to shop for the perfect Jungle Book gift for someone or yourself. You deserve it.
To celebrate Black History Month and the closing month of Walt Disney's The Jungle Book, Making a Masterpiece, we wanted to share the interview we had with Disney legend Floyd Norman. Floyd was handpicked by Walt Disney to move into the story department, where he helped storyboard and write The Jungle Book. Let's hear from him about his experience working on the film.
The first thing that comes to mind is the scene I started on when I came onto the picture, and that was Shere Khan coming in to question Kaa the Python. That scene still makes me smile today because of having the opportunity to work with Sterling Holloway, Robert and Richard Sherman, and so many wonderful and talented people.
Floyd is always such a great interview. If you watch his documentary, Floyd Norman, An Animated Life, he had such a wide-ranging and impactful career, really kind of a Forrest Gump of 20th and 21st century animation. He was just everywhere where something was happening.
I know, right?
Right, yeah.
He worked in the early days or like the kind of last chapter of Walt Disney's studio time, working on the Jungle Book, and then also worked at Pixar, like 2D to 3D. He's very versatile.
Yeah, and Hanna-Barbera making Scooby-Doo and others, like just everywhere that animation was happening, his fingerprints are all over, and we're grateful for that.
Yeah, definitely.
So now it is time to recap last month's Collections Clash results. The topic was our Disneyland model. You voted on our Instagram stories which features on the model we covered were your favorites.
In the first round, it was between your pick, Chris, of the Disneyland Castle, and my pick of Walt's apartment. This one was closer than anticipated. I really thought it was going to be a complete clean sweep. Walt's apartment received 42%, and Sleeping Beauty Castle won with 58% of the votes.
Our listeners really love the apartment.
I know.
And so do we. I mean, you come into the awards lobby, you see the furniture from the apartment, and then you get to go around to the model and see the apartment and see the little light flickering. It's perfect. Round 2 featured my pick of the Disneyland Railroad and your pick of It's a Small World. It was another squeaker. It's a Small World received 46% of the votes, while the Disneyland Railroad won with 54% of the votes.
I kind of have a bone to pick with this one because The amount of times that the Disneyland Railroad, that's a walk-on ride. I know people don't enjoy it that much. And yet, it's a small world, like always has a great line. I mean, sometimes it is a walk-on, but come on.
Well, remember, this is our viewers too. The people who come to the Walt Disney Family Museum, they love their trains, just like Walt loved his trains.
I know. I just, have bone to pick every time that I don't win. So well, in the final round, it was between your pick of Matterhorn bobsleds and my pick of Space Mountain. Space Mountain received 44% of the votes, and the Matterhorn bobsled won with 56% of the votes. So congrats, Chris. Clean sweep again. You're 3 for 3.
Thank you. I know what the people want. It was such a strong competition, though. All of those rounds really could have gone either way. Now, since these rules aren't set in stone, how about we switch up the format a little bit? Now, the way we've been playing is that the previous month's winner always goes first. But I propose that if you win 3 in a row, then the first pick for the following month will revert to the other person. Going first is definitely an advantage, so this ensures that there's a little bit more parity in the game. Do we have an accord?
That sounds very fair. Let's virtually shake on it. All right. Well, we're also going to be changing the style of picking the objects to be a little bit more like the snake draft style. So, where the first round goes in order and then the second round goes in reverse. And so, hopefully, it's an even more bit of an even playing field going forward. So, trying to make it as so no one has the total upper hand every single time. So, now it is time for this month's Collections Clash. Chris and I are given a topic for the month and each pick 3 objects in the museum to square off. This month, in celebration of Valentine's Day, the topic is love.
Oh, that's so sweet. Kick us off, Brie.
All right, for my first pick, I'm going with the one, the only, the earliest known drawing of Mickey and Minnie Mouse.
Incredible pick. That is love. That is love, really.
It really is. And, it was not only the earliest known drawing of these iconic characters, but it proved that there was never a version of Mickey without his partner, Minnie. And almost 95 years later, their love is still as strong as ever when they first appeared in Steamboat Willie. Now, this very special piece of Disney history is on display in our second gallery, celebrating the creation and stardom of Mickey Mouse. And it was actually recovered from a family vault decades after Walt's passing. While we can't exactly say who drew these early drawings, you can see that the decision-making process in these rough animation sketches as Walt, Ub Iwerks, and Les Clark ironed out these now iconic designs of these characters. Here's a quote from Walt about Mickey and Minnie's relationship status from the article penned by Walt in the film Pictorial in September 1933. Quote, "In private life, Mickey is married to Minnie. A lot of people have written to him asking this question because sometimes he appears to be married to her in his films and other times still courting her. What it really amounts to is that Minnie is, for screen purposes, his leading lady. If the story calls for a romantic courtship, then Minnie is the girl. But when the story requires a married couple, then they appear as man and wife. In the studio, we have decided that they're married, really." End quote. So another little bonus story to tie this theme of love with this object is Mickey's name. As the story goes, after Walt had lost the rights to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, on the train trip back, Walt and his wife Lillian had time to talk about the new cartoon star that was needed to replace Oswald. In particular, Walt recalled being fond of a cartoon mouse, even going so far to suggest the name Mortimer Mouse. Lillian was not a fan of that name. She thought it sounded pompous and suggested Mickey instead.
And we are all the more thankful for her for choosing Mickey over Mortimer. Really, it's love on a couple of levels. Obviously, Mickey and Minnie being one of the most iconic couples in animation history, and also the love between Walt and Lillian, which I believe we're going to touch on a little later between our choices. So let's see where that goes. When I thought of the topic of love, I thought of the many weddings that we have represented throughout the galleries. In that spirit, my first pick is the pictures of Walt and his daughters on their wedding days. Beyond being very sweet celebrations of love, just on its face, I like bringing up a particular detail in this section of the galleries on all of my tours. Let's take a side-by-side comparison of these pictures with Diane, Walt's daughter and our co-founder. In one picture, Walt is walking with his daughter, Diane, and you can see that they're roughly the same height. Walt was not a very tall man, as you can see. But for the staged photo later, you can see that Walt is in fact much taller and is eye level with his new son-in-law, Ron Miller, leading eagle-eyed observers to assume that he's standing on a box or a platform of some kind. The really kind of cute and humanizing look at the man behind the brand, a view of Walt that we never really get the chance to see anywhere but the Walt Disney Family Museum. So that's my first pick of Love in the Galleries.
Sometimes it's hard to see in our galleries how tall Ron Miller was. He was over 6 feet tall. And so when you see that photo, you're like, whoa, okay. Either Walt is like super tall, sizing up to the football player, Ron Miller. So I love that. And I love in that the photo where it's Diane, Ron, and Walt, and they're standing in front or behind their wedding cake. And if you look closely, you'll see there's these little cake toppers, and those were actually designed by Mary Blair. And there's one, really small one of Diane looking cute as ever. And then one really tall one of a football player, and he's holding a little football. So I love that little detail. And then also like Sharon's photos are just so beautiful. Her wedding photos, her and Walt, you can tell he was just such a proud father.
Absolutely. It's both kind of the love of Walt's daughters with their husbands, but also the love of Walt for his daughters too that are on display that makes it kind of the perfect representation of love in our galleries. So that's why I chose that. Now with since we're doing the snake style draft, that means I get the next pick. So my second pick is the invitation for Walt and Lillian's Tempus Fugit celebration on display in Gallery 9 right before the Disneyland model. In the same spirit as the pictures of weddings that I took for my first pick, what says love like a celebration of love, specifically the 30th wedding anniversary of Walt and Lily. So to take a step back, on July 13th, 1925, Walt Disney married Lillian Bounds at her brother's home in Lewiston, Idaho. Walt and Lily had met when Miss Bounds had acquired a job at the Disney Brothers cartoon studio as an inker and painter. 30 years later, in 1955, the couple celebrated their anniversary with friends and family as Walt readied to open Disneyland, his very own new experience in entertainment. The site for such a party was an upstart new saloon in a place called Frontierland. Invitations were dispatched to friends and relatives, Hollywood celebrities, and old acquaintances alike. The card declared the party a Tempus Fugit celebration, Tempus Fugit being a Latin phrase commonly translated as time flies. They were instructed to come to Disneyland, quote, where there's plenty of room, end quote, and also reminded, quote, by the way, no gifts please, we have everything, including a grandson. Very, very cute. It began, recalled Diane Disney Miller, on the Mark Twain riverboat with mint juleps, and then moved over to the Golden Horseshoe Saloon for dinner and the review. Suddenly, Dad, this is Diane speaking, suddenly Dad appeared in one of the balcony boxes on the side of the stage. At this point in the show, Wally Bogue, as Pecos Bill, was firing blanks. Dad returned fire with his thumb and forefinger, and then began to climb down to the stage. I think that everyone was a bit worried. I know I did. When he got to the stage, he stood there beaming at everyone. He was so happy, end quote. When Lily reluctantly joined her husband on the Golden Horseshoe stage, Walt started dancing with his bride of 30 years. Quote, she didn't know it, revealed Wally, but he had taken some dancing lessons because he knew how happy it would make her, end quote. And soon everyone was dancing. Diane even recounted of this event, quote, I never saw my dad happier ever, 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 end quote. Just a sweet story.
Well, that is just the most heartwarming story. I know. The fact that he took dancing lessons on his own to impress his wife. I mean, what a wonderful husband Walt was.
There you go. Just another way that we have these little objects, images, videos in the galleries that a lot of people pass right by, but hold such a story that tells another side of this very mythic figure in the kind of real person that he was. So that is my second example of love in the galleries.
You're knocking it out of the park. Yeah, these two picks are very humanizing to who the man was, Walt Disney. Well, my second pick celebrates Walt's love of trains and, more importantly, his love for his wife with the Lily Bell train.
I can't believe it was right up there and I missed it. I even passed by it on the ramp in Gallery 9 to get to the anniversary invitation and just missed that. It was staring at me right in the face.
Yeah, you did take the Disneyland Railroad last time, so you'd be really making yourself the ultimate train guy if you did take this. So, we're now pretty even on who's the bigger train person here.
Fair. All aboard.
Yeah, all aboard. That's right. I actually didn't when it comes to trains, I didn't think I really enjoyed the idea of the train hobby. And it wasn't until we had our exhibition, I think it was called Waltz Trains.
All aboard a celebration of waltz trains.
Yes. And I was a volunteer at the time, and I always was stationed in that exhibition. And I fell in love with trains. I get why Walt really loved this hobby. Like, I totally understand it. And so I have like way more to talk about trains when I give tours than like any aspect of the museum. So, anyways, well, Walt famously said, quote, "In one way or another, I have always loved trains." Named after his wife, Lillian, the Lily Bell is a 1/8 scale model of an actual steam train that ran on a half-mile track around the Disney family's Holmby Hills home. Lillian had originally thought the train would run around the lower portion of the property, and she had planned extensive gardens around the north side of the home. She recalled, quote, "I made it clear that I wasn't thrilled because his train was going to run through the middle of an area where I had planned to grow a beautiful garden," end quote. Walt came up with a creative solution to save Lillian's garden and allow him to run his train. He consulted with studio attorneys about devising a humorous legal document in which Lillian would grant him a right-of-way for his railroad. He even had both of his daughters sign this document to make sure the whole family was in on it. The project brought together artists, machinists, and railroad enthusiasts that would go on to be some of his earliest Imagineers. And this project combined Walt's lifelong interest in train and his hobby of miniatures.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that right-of-way agreement is still the only right-of-way agreement between two married people.
I know. Oh my gosh, I love it. Back on this snake draft. Now I get the first pick of the last round. So my third pick is the It's a Small World case in our galleries that celebrate the not so small love story of artists Mark and Alice Davis, who worked on the attraction together.
Great pick. That would have been my next choice.
I know. I love It's a Small World and kind of, carrying that through. In the special case located in Gallery 9, next to our audio animatronic Tiki Bird, Pepe del Presidio, there is a concept artwork from both Alice and Mark Davis. It's a Small World was the first Imagineering project Alice Davis would work on. Walt had requested Alice to do the costumes for the attraction that was set to debut in the 1964-65 New York World's Fair. Mark, who had previously been an animator at the studios, working on some of the most iconic characters like Tinkerbell, Cruella de Vil, and Maleficent, that's just to name a few, he had been one of the many to transition from animation to Imagineering. Mark was working on It's a Small World and had created cutout models for different scenes in the attraction. And that's what we have on display. We have some of his concept cutouts and Alice's detailed costume design drawings for many of the children seen in the attraction. And this wouldn't be the only attraction the couple would work on together. They collaborated on General Electric's Carousel of Progress and then Pirates of the Caribbean. To this day, they are the only married couple to have a dedicated Main Street USA windows for their contributions to Disneyland, and they are perfectly seated right next to each other.
Very cute. I love the Mark and Alice story. I wrote on the Mark and Alice story a few years ago for the blog. Just such from working together on Sleeping Beauty onwards, just such a great, fruitful, creative partnership. And when you hear Alice talk about Mark, and likewise on the other side, you can just feel all the love between them. So definitely, I love that story.
We had a really wonderful special exhibition now, probably like 6-7 years ago, the Leading Ladies in Femme Fatales, the art of Mark Davis. And in the center of that special exhibition that was in our lower lobby, there was a framed artwork of some of the select cards that Mark Davis had created for Alice, and they were just so cute and just showed how much love there was between them. And I just love kind of celebrating their love together.
I forgot about the Valentines. That was so great.
Yeah, I know. And we just recently lost Alice Davis, so also wanted to kind of pay tribute to her memory and to celebrate Alice Davis's legacy.
A wonderful legacy she left behind, earning that Disney Legend and Disneyland Window distinction many times over.
Most definitely.
So if you've noticed, I've had kind of a theme with my picks. We are the Walt Disney Family Museum, so my picks about love in the galleries have been centered on the Disney family. First, I covered Walt's love for his daughters and for the loves of their lives, and Walt's love for his wife. My third pick is a curious one because it's not particularly about the item itself, but about what the project represents. In our collection, we have a napkin with a sketch of Epcot in Walt's handwriting. When Walt passed away, his brother Roy Oliver picked up the Disney World project and saw it to completion. Roy renamed it Walt Disney World as a tribute to his late brother's dream and vision. Roy put all of his time and effort into opening Walt Disney World and passed away just 2.5 months after it opened. The Epcot napkin, to me, represents another huge through line of love in our galleries, Roy's love for his brother. Roy looked out for his brother his whole life. They went into business together, were wildly and globally successful, and he saw his final dream realized. So in terms of the big stories of love in our galleries, it's hard not to pick Walt and Roy's love for each other.
I absolutely love that. And I think that is something you feel throughout our gallery. It's not always the most exciting aspect to hear about the financials of the Walt Disney Company. And that was a huge part of what Roy did. But he really supplied the funds and did all of that hard work dealings to make Walt's dreams a reality. And a lot of those films wouldn't have been able to been made without the financing of it. And to see that final project of Walt Disney World being completed with that brotherly love is just so, I mean, walking into that last gallery, it is so heartwarming and so sad. And like definitely why we always see people, including myself, walk out of that gallery with tears in their eyes because Walt's dreams were realized. And even from the very beginning of his life to the very end, his brother was there for him. And I love that.
Absolutely.
Well, we had too many fun options that it's always hard to just pick 3 each. And so we wanted to include some honorable mentions. These will not be up for voting. My first honorable mention is Herman Schulteis's Notebook, because it was his love for visual effects that led him to document his and his team's process in the Notebook in the first place. And this is my second attempt to make you, the listener, love this notebook as much as me. Where else would you learn that actual lights were placed on the movement pathways of the fairies in the Nutcracker Suite segment in Fantasia? And that had been the same technique used for the fireflies in the Old Mill and the candles in Snow White. And in that same notebook, learn about Schulteis's time spent in the enclosure with a hippo named Puddles. I will never get over this Puddles story.
Justice for Puddles. Yes, I mean, it's definitely a good pick that the Schulteis notebook and all the notebooks that he created were a labor of love. You know, he didn't want these techniques to be lost to the ages, which a lot of them were until we had any idea that these notebooks existed. So definitely a great pick for that. My first honorable mention is not an object at all. Part of the reason why I couldn't pick it. There's a video that's accessible in our galleries via an interactive station where Disney legend and one of Walt's 9 old men, Frank Thomas, describes developing the Lady and the Tramp meatball scene, arguably the most iconic scene of Disney love in history. He then, very comedically, stages a reenactment of the scene between 2 very real dogs splitting a real plate of spaghetti. And let's just say I can understand why this scene could only work with the help of animation.
It's a very fun scene to watch, and just like the chaos that ensues with the 2 dogs.
It's very cute. And I mean, the story of that scene is really cool too. Just as a quick side note, that it was originally not going to be in the film at all. Walt himself had taken the meatball scene out of Lady and the Tramp, and Frank Thomas needed some work, and he found that he had a way to do the scene where it worked and was sweet and tender and would continue to develop the relationship between the 2 dogs in a way that continued to push the story along. And in that process, creates one of the most iconic scenes in Disney history. So much so that even Walt, approached Frank after the fact and said, "I hear you have the best scene in the picture." Which, if you've heard about Walt giving compliments, usually Walt's best compliment was, "That'll work." So to be told, even maybe a little bit begrudgingly, that Frank had found a way to make it work that Walt didn't see initially, just, "I hear you have the best scene in the picture." That's it. I mean, that's as high praise as it gets. I
love that. That's a great pick. Well, my next honorable mention, these are just off the wall, honorable mention.
Literally
picks.
Off the wall.
Yes. Off the wall, into the screens. My honorable mention is the chili cans on display alongside Walt's favorite food list. Now, when I explain it, it makes more sense, but this is why I could not pick this. I really wanted to. I thought it would be really fun to pick this, but I didn't think it would get any votes. This helps showcase Walt's love of chili and his love of canned food. Now, the last Museum Musings episode, I told the story of Walt gifting a full supply of canned food to his daughter, Diane, when she and her husband, Ron, had their first child. And I have another great story of Walt's love of canned food that I just love telling. When Walt was just about to file for bankruptcy for the Laugh-O-Grams studio in Kansas City, so around 1923-ish, Walt was all out of money, and a friend of his had gone on a picnic and brought back leftovers and gave him some leftover canned beans. And what I love about this story is actually in the recording. This is from the Pete Martin interviews, and Pete says, quote, "It was kind of a low point in your life," end quote. And Walt responds, "No, I mean, I loved beans." And I just love that response. There's so much positivity in it and just optimism that kind of scrounging for food was definitely, one could say, a total low point. But, because he had those beans, who could complain?
Well, and it's said in the kind of way where you could definitely see that Walt has had to explain his love of beans a lot throughout his life, that even though he got to be this world-renowned filmmaker, this innovator, bumping elbows with the Hollywood elite, creating, one of the most successful American film studios of all time, that he really just continued to have this simple food taste that he had from his youth, from when he was starting his own business and couldn't afford more expensive foods, that just became his palate for the rest of his life, and that he's had to justify how much he's liked beans. So there's a little kind of, it's not a low point in my life. I love beans.
Yeah.
Well, we can put this to our viewers, and you can respond to our Instagram story if you would vote for Walt's beans in a round. That way, we'll know for sure that we can include something like that in a future collections clash.
Yeah, definitely.
So my next honorable mention is the bronzed hat in Gallery 9, which is one of your favorites, Brie. I didn't want to pick this because I believe we discussed it recently, but it is just such a great example of love that it's worth recapping again. In the 1930s and 1940s, Walt was known to keep up with the fashion of wearing all sorts of hats, many of which Lily was not particularly fond of. While vacationing in Mexico, Lily and Walt attended a bullfight, where tradition dictates the spectators throw their hats into the ring. Lily swiftly grabbed the hat off of Walt's head, planning to toss the hat away, but Walt was too fast and grabbed it back before it disappeared. Later, Walt surprised his wife with the same hat. He had it bronzed, shaped the brim into a heart, and filled it with violets for her birthday in 1941. Very sweet.
I love that one. And I know we had covered a couple of different objects that would have been so perfect for this particular prompt. So I'm glad that made it to your honorable mentions. Well, my last honorable mention is Walt's love of his grandkids, as seen in the items kept in his valet box. We have two special items that stick out on display in Gallery 9. First is a Partagast cigar announcing the birth of Walt's grandson with his namesake, Walter Elias Disney Miller, who would go on to be the museum's co-founder. And you can see a cute little drawing done by Walt's eldest grandson, Christopher. Right now, you can see the early artistic talent from Chris Miller. And then in our lower lobby, you can see how that blossomed into our current exhibition, Chris Miller Kaleidoscope.
Incredible pull. Wow, really lassoed that current exhibition in there. Good job.
Yeah. I gotta, find a way to promote these exhibitions. Gotta get creative. And even, that might have been the main reason I picked it for my honorable mention.
Very good. Very good. I gotta keep up my plug-in game.
Yeah. Well, I just love those kind of objects that Walt's love and celebration of his grandchildren can be seen throughout many objects in Gallery 9, including Chris's Autopia car and just kind of the wonderful photos that are on display. So lots of love there.
There you go. My last honorable mention is the Griffith Park bench that we have on display in Gallery 8 as an example of Walt's love for his daughters. In addition to driving his daughters Diane and Sharon to school every day until they were of driving age, Walt would spend Sundays, or Daddy's Day, with his girls, including a regular trip to Griffith Park to ride the carousel. As Walt tells it, he would sit on a nearby bench, eating peanuts, thinking to himself that there should be an amusement enterprise that parents and children could enjoy together. Unsurprisingly, this daydream eventually coalesced into Disneyland Park and opened a prolific chapter in both Walt's life and the company's history. Well, that just about brings us to the end of our Collections Clash. Visit our Instagram stories today, Wednesday, February 1st, to vote on your favorite objects, or email us at podcast@wdfmuseum.org to cast your votes or share your favorite examples of love in the galleries. Or if you want us to pick Walt's chili beans for a future segment of this show. So please do that. We're all in on beans talk.
I mean, I apparently have so many stories about Walt's love of food and canned food and beans. So I didn't realize I had had so many examples. Well, this was so much fun. I love getting to do this with you, Chris. And thank you to you all the listeners, for tuning in to WDFM, the official Walt Disney Family Museum podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at WDF Museum for all the latest updates.
On this Bella Notte, keep moving forward.
Bye.
Bye.